That's why when they say, well, where's mom? I very oftentimes will ask, well, where do you think mom is? Oh, she must be at work. Yep, she's at work. Well, that's a 2 score plus for you. One, you just told them they were right, and everybody likes to be told that they're right. And number two, you've allayed their fears that anything's bad with mom. She's at work. That's where he normally thinks she is. That's where he is in his life right now. That's where we let him be. Okay. The other thing that I oftentimes see patient families do is try to teach the person with dementia or try to test how their memory is. Oh, do you remember who this lady is? How anxiety producing is that? Have you ever walked up to somebody and you know their name and you cannot remember their name, and you're standing next to somebody and you know you want to introduce them and you cannot remember that person's name? You know that feeling of anxiety that comes over you? Well, can you imagine how your loved one feels when you walk up to somebody who they have no idea who they are and you say, do you remember this lady? They don't want to say no. They don't want to act, they don't want to feel stupid. Hear that all the time with my dementia patients, right? I'm stupid because I don't know this information. You're not stupid because you can't remember. But if we put you into a situation where you feel like you have to perform or know this information, all we're doing is agitating you. All right, let's talk about treatments for anxiety. So obviously, even though I write pills for a living, we try to do non-pharmacologic interventions first, right? So, and we talked about a lot of these, making sure that we've met their unmet basic needs, right? So, soothing music, soothing, calm environment. You know, many of you have seen the little blue house here at Town Square. When we built the little blue house and decorated it the way we did with the lamps instead of the big overhead lights, it was because we knew we needed a calming space. When somebody was overstimulated or was agitated or was very anxious, I wanted my staff to be able to say, pick up the radio and say, Susie needs to spend some time in the little blue house. So that we all knew that the little blue house meant I'm anxious. I'm not really, I'm struggling and I need some quiet time. There's a lot of stimulation that goes on in Town Square. And it's a double-edged sword. We want to cognitively stimulate them, right? We want them to be active and busy, but we don't want to send them over the edge. So we need to have that space that's quiet and calm. And we should all have that in our home. A place where mom can go back to her room and sit in comfy Barca lounger, or she can, you know, go into another room and listen to music where the TV, you know, I come into these apartments and the ALFs and Fox News is on a 75-inch television, you know, blaring, and the poor resident is sitting there, and I'm like, you know, like I wouldn't be able to stand it for 5 minutes. I can just imagine this poor person with dementia, right? So we want to remember that we don't want the environment to be overstimulating. We want it to be calm, soothing, sensory stimulation, a little back rub, a hand massage. Sometimes if they're just so anxious, break out the hand cream and give them a hand massage. That's the best release of dopamine and serotonin that we can have. Rub their shoulders, rub their feet, anything that's physical touch. If there's somebody who likes to be touched physically. Now, if they never like massage, that's not going to work, right? So you have to know your person. Sometimes they like a warm, snuggly blanket or to put their slippers on or whatever. But positive sensory stimulation is going to help that anxiety and agitation. Physical contact, same thing, hug. Hugs are amazing for agitated people. I know you're upset, I know you're angry, come on over here and give me a hug. It can sometimes break it, and then they forget what they were upset or not. If they're hurling stuff at you, probably not a good time to ask for a hug, right? But if they're crying or they're upset or and it's got to be a 30-second hug. In order for us to secrete oxytocin, we need at least a 30-second hug. 30 seconds is a long time. 30-second hug. Decreasing isolation. Sometimes they're by themselves or they're scared. They're alone. They don't know what's going on. I see this a lot in my assisted living facilities. They're in their room. They're by themselves. They didn't want to come out to the activity. They kind of forgot anybody even came in to get them for the activity. They don't know that they can go out and be with other people. And I go in and find them sitting in their rooms very anxious and isolated. So we always want to make sure that a lot of times wives will tell me, oh yeah, this is my Velcro husband, right? He's like stuck to me every place I go. He's right on my hip. It's again, that feeling of not wanting to be alone, not wanting to be isolated, wanting to have that physical connection that we can have with another person. And then there's medications. So did I do a slide on medications? Let me see what I did there. No, oh, see, I did have reorientation versus redirection on here. I knew it was important. So let me just go through a couple of the other things I have on here. So buy a few seconds to think. When they ask you a question, and you know that the answer to the question is something that you probably don't want to tell them, you want to think for a couple minutes, right? You want to say, and very often the best way to do this is to turn the question around on that, right? Like when I said, they ask you, where's mom? Well, where do you think mom is, right? And I don't know where mom is. Well, we're going to find out about that. But first, let's go get a snack. And then we'll come back and figure out where mom is, right? Redirection, coming up with something else for them to think about. 5 minutes later, they're going to forget that they asked that question. Watch nonverbal cues. Nonverbal cues are really important in terms of reorientation and redirection. If we tell them something that they want to hear, they relax, right? If we tell them that mom's at work, now they might be anxious that mom's not going to get home from work or not. Mom. That's why oftentimes asking them where they think the person is very helpful, because then it can, you know, telling them that they're right really calms them down, right? Be creative with your responses, right? You can, you know, we're living in their world. We're not trying to bring them back into our world. So, you know, if they tell you they went shopping in New York City yesterday and you know they were at Town Square all day, your answer or your question to them is, that's fabulous. What did you buy? Get into their world. Don't try to bring them back into yours. Focus on what really matters. There are times that we have to reorient. I'm going to grab the keys, honey, and run to Publix and get some orange juice. No, you're not driving. Let me get those keys from you, right? Because that's dangerous. So we have to reorient in that moment, right? We can redirect too. You know what? I'll go get the orange juice later. No, I'm going to go get it. Still got the keys in his hand, still wants to walk out that door. At some point, you may actually have to reorient and say, okay, you're not driving anymore. You know, remember, you're not driving. I will do that for you. Let me have the keys. Because there are times when you do sort of have to put your foot down and be firm about reorienting, because they're in danger. They're putting themselves in danger. Okay? And again, the biggest, most important piece of information I can give you is don't try to correct them. Even if they're way off base, if they're telling you stuff that you know isn't true, if they come home, and we had this happen, we have this one gentleman who's got terrible, terrible delusions, and he comes home and he tells his daughter that they beat him up at Town Square. Now, she knows that they didn't beat him up there. And so what she was telling him was, no, that didn't happen, Dad. And I said, because in his mind, that happened. Instead, what you say is, oh my God, I'm so sorry that happened. Validate the emotion. I know you're really upset about that. I'm going to find out and get to the bottom of this. Now, what do they feel? They feel like you've taken care of them. You believe them, and you're going to help them deal with that situation. Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want that? Everybody wants to know that whatever their concern is taken seriously, and that you're going to do something about it. Now, are you going to call Town Square and say, hey, did you beat up my father? Probably not, right? But you might let us know that he's having these delusions so we can maybe figure out where it's coming from. And maybe it was the loud noise in the documentary that we were showing that day. And so maybe Joe's not a great one for the documentaries. And so maybe we'll put him in maybe he needs all the quiet, soothing activities and none of the ones that are overstimulating for him, right? So redirection versus reorientation, very, very important. We talked about overstimulation. We talked about processing information. Boy, I'm all over the place today, huh? Unmet needs. Okay, hunger, thirst, warmth, socialization, and safety, right? Thirsty. They don't drink. It's very hard to get them to drink, but they're thirsty and they need that fluid. Fruit. We live in a state where you can buy watermelon 365 days a year. Providing your loved one with grapes, popsicles, watermelon, things that are high in water concentration, very important. When you are dehydrated, you feel lethargic, you're irritable, you don't feel like yourself. They can't say, I haven't drank anything all day and now I feel horrible and that's why I'm grumpy. Like, they're not going to be able to make that leap. You have to make that leap for them, right? We talked about temperature. Warmth is really important. As we all have talked about before, there's damage to the different lobes of the brain, particularly the parietal lobe of the brain, which makes it difficult for us to mediate our temperature. People with dementia are always cold, always. I remember when I first moved down here from Connecticut and I go into the memory care units, and there was this little guy with a North Face jacket on and gloves, and it was like July. It was like, always cold, always cold. And it's because they can't raise their body temperature. They can't regulate their own body temperature. So do not dress them in shorts and a t-shirt and take them out to dinner where the temperature in the restaurant is 68 degrees. They're not going to be able to say they're cold, but boy, they're not going to have a really good meal, and neither are you, because they're going to be up, down, and they're going to be agitated, and they're going to, and you're not going to be able to figure out why. Okay. All right. And hungry too. Many times they don't know they're hungry. We talk about hangry, right? For those of us who are cognitively intact, well, they can't tell us that they're hangry. So we need to be able to do that for them. And we talked about pain. People with dementia experience pain very differently than those who are cognitively intact. And so I tell people that at the end of dementia, stage 5 and stage 6, we start to muscle waste. And very oftentimes we'll see this. People will eat and eat and eat, and yet they still lose weight. And the families will be like, God, she cleans her plate and she's still losing weight because she's muscle wasting. That muscle is beginning to break down and go away. And when muscle breaks down, it's very painful. How many of you have ever had a tetanus shot? And your arm is killing you the next day? That's what muscles feel like when they break down. So can you imagine sort of feeling that way all throughout your body and not really being able to tell somebody that that's how you feel? A couple of Tylenol a couple of times a day can significantly help with agitation because they can't articulate to us that they're having pain. But we know if they're at that stage of dementia that they're losing weight, that their body's breaking down that muscle, that that's where they're at. So I didn't go into the medications, but there are other pharmacologic interventions to use for people that have anxiety and agitation. It's a completely different talk, but it is the other option, right? So first we tried the non-pharmacologic, which was basically what this talk was about, was what are the reasons for anxiety and agitation, and then how can we as caregivers help in terms of that. The next step then is to reach out to your healthcare provider and say, I've tried all of these things and mom's still agitated and she's still anxious. What can we do from a pharmacologic standpoint? Okay. Questions? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so okay, so I'll just repeat the question for the video, but the question is limited function, is it progressive or does it just kind of come and go? So it's kind of a little bit of both, and I'm gonna explain it based on different things that we do. And I know many of you have heard me use this analogy before. You get in your car and you don't even think about how to drive it, right? Did you ever rent a car? So now you get in the car, you know how to drive a car. I rented a car this past weekend. I had to Google where to start the car. On my car, it's on the buttons over here. In this car, it was underneath the steering wheel column. Who the heck would have looked there? So I'm sitting there knowing I need to pull out, trying to figure out where the mirrors are, trying to figure out how to even turn this thing on, and I'm feeling really anxious because my executive function is limited in that standpoint because I can't move to the next step without being able to do that first step. Things that we do over and over and over again we tend to hold on to longer. So yes, like the showering tends to be something that, the thing that's difficult with dementia, and we've talked about this before as well, is that it fluctuates. So one day the patient with dementia can do this, get dressed, they know how to put their arms through and and the next day they come out and the shirt's on backwards. And you're like, but mom, you were able to dress yourself yesterday. And then 2 days from now, she completely gets dressed all by herself. And you're like, the brain in dementia is like Swiss cheese. Sometimes the stimulation comes in, hits the cheese, and the person can actually process it and do something. And other times, right through one of those holes into the abyss. And as the brain becomes more holes, those things become less and less able for them to do. So it's very difficult to predict. But over a period of time, you'll begin to see the patterns where they can do some of the things because they can carry out some of the executive function, but not anything else. Does that make sense? All right. That's a really good question. That's a very good question. So the question is, how do we know when they need help? So bathing is really a hard one, right? Because again, if it's your mother, you don't want to say, Mom, I'm going to follow you into the shower, right? A lot of times what I have spouses do is go into the bathroom while they're taking a shower and sort of eyeball them and make sure they're washing their hair or, making sure that their clothes are changed. Sometimes they'll go into the shower, they take a shower, they come out, they're wearing the same clothes, right? It's like, so you have to start slowly doing those things for her. She gets in the shower, you go, Mom, you go get in the shower, I'm going to throw your clothes in the laundry. Not I'm doing this for you because you don't know how to do it. I'm just being a helpful daughter. We never want them to feel disrespected. We never want them to feel like they can't do things for themselves. And it's very hard. And I always say this, I always feel awful when I give these talks. And here I am talking to caregivers that are overwhelmed and overburdened and stressed, and then telling you, and you have to do all these things too, on top of everything that you're doing. But your life will be easier if you come at it from a different direction. If you don't try to hit it head on and you try to gently manipulate them to do what it is that you want them to do without, affecting their self-esteem or ego, that they're not doing it correctly. When she starts giving you a hard time about taking a shower, it's because she can't do it on her own anymore. That's why they give you a hard time about the shower, right? Because right. Right. Mhm. Yeah, and sometimes, again, it's how we begin to become more used to something, right? Like if you're used to having your spouse wandering around in the bathroom when you're taking a shower, then it's not a big deal when they start doing that. So as you have somebody who's declining, you want to start making yourself more present in their life during ADLs. It then becomes the new normal, right? Whereas you don't want to wait until you're at that point where now they're refusing to take a shower because now they're not going to let you into that bathroom, right? But if you're, oh, I got to put the towels away, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, and it becomes a normal thing that you happen to show up every single time they're in the shower, it becomes less traumatic for them. Does that make sense? They're fairly easily led when they have dementia when you come at them with kindness versus waiting until it's a real problem and then having to try to hit that problem head on. Does that make sense? Go ahead. Sure. Mm-hmm. They don't really sweat very much because they don't get hot. Sweating is our body's way of cooling ourselves down. Sweat provides water on our surface, and then as the water evaporates, it lowers our temperature. What happens to people with dementia is they're very susceptible to infections. This is why they get urinary tract infections so frequently. We go to the grocery store, we put our hands on that grocery cart that's got germs all over it. We come home that night and we kind of feel a little low-grade fever, right? but we don't really get sick. We have an immune system. We have an ability to fight off that bacteria that we came into contact with. People with dementia don't. They can't raise that temperature. They can't get it up above 100. And so they don't have the ability to fight off those bacteria and that infection. And that's why they get sick faster. We found that out really during COVID. It was really interesting to me because all of the young health professionals and people I knew, we've all went out, got our COVID shot. We all got sick as a dog. We had fevers. They gave all my patients in the assisted living facility who had moderate to severe dementia COVID, not one of them spiked a fever. It's like crazy because they couldn't mount the same immune response. So, all right, one more. That's an anxiety-based behavior for sure. Yeah, that's fear that I'm not going to have something to put on, right? That they layer. Oftentimes you'll see them, they put on one shirt and then they put on another shirt and they put on another shirt and they come out and they got 3 shirts on. And you go, oh, don't you look lovely today? No, I'm serious. You don't say, go take that shirt off, or you got 3 shirts on. You go, come on, we're going to Publix with all 3 shirts on. That's a battle it's just not worth fighting. And they're telling you something when they do that. They're telling you that they're not comfortable, that they're worried that they don't have. And sometimes that's, we have to pick up on those nonverbal cues. So we have to, every time we put clothes in the laundry, we say, oh, isn't it great? We have 15 shirts for you. So even though we have to wash this one, you've got more shirts. Because you've actually answered their question before they've even told you what it is. It's a lot. I know, but it will make your life easier if you do these things. I promise. Right now we're done on same issue. Can't really fight off the infections, but a lot of times that can be undiagnosed diabetes. Has she been tested for diabetes? Interesting. Does she really crave sweets? Because that's typically a stage 5, really craving the sweets. Yeah, yeah. I was going to say try to decrease the sugars in her system because that's typically what that is. The sugar feeds the yeast. Yeah, that's actually not that bad. Some of that could be too. And that's the other thing. She's in there for 45 minutes, but what's she doing in there? Like, does she really actually fully wash? And sometimes that's hard to tell. So that's a tough one for me because that's part of the reason why we do a lot of our stuff here at Town Square, because it's just easier if the person doesn't have a white coat on and it's not in the doctor's office, and you can get them to be seen without them sort of being seen. I was talking to my student about that today, about how we don't always tell them that we're putting them on medication. We treat them for what's in their best interest. We talk to their family. We get their family to consent to the medication, but we don't necessarily tell them because they don't have the cognitive ability to understand those things. There are mobile groups that will come to the house. Right. Yeah, sometimes that is a way to do it, is to have somebody come to the home. I do know of a couple. Okay, well, I'm not sure that that's not necessarily a norm. Yeah, so that would be a good example of a catastrophic reaction to something that doesn't require that much of a. Right. Did you have another question? Yeah. Well, I think, again, with the overstimulation, more importantly, is recognizing that it's happening. So a lot of times, we go out and we do something, and we get overstimulated, and it's hard for us to even be aware of it. I think again, if you know that you're taking the person that has dementia someplace that they're unfamiliar with, where there may be a loud noise, where there's a lot of people talking, it happens around the holidays all the time. And I think when I did my holiday talk, we talked about this a lot, right? Like, yeah, in theory, it sounds great to go to the grandkids' house for Christmas where all the relatives are going to be there. But really, for the person with dementia, it's really not a great idea. And if you do decide to go, you're going to show up, you're going to have something very quick to eat, you're going to say hello to everybody, and you're going to leave. Because that's about as much stimulation as they're going to be able to. So anticipating those environments that you know are going to be overstimulating, going out to dinner in August is great in Florida. There's nobody out there. But in February, it's a completely different story, right? So you have to sort of think about those things. And going at 4 o'clock for early bird special is probably a better idea than waiting until 7 when everybody is there. And I tell people making their world as small as possible is helpful, because that structure that they have, that knowing what's going to happen next, takes away a lot of that anxiety. If you do the same thing over and over and over again, then you're not tasked with having to understand or process new information, right? So if you want to go out every week for breakfast on Sunday, that's good. Go to church, go to breakfast, go home. If it becomes part of your daily, weekly routine, they'll be less likely to become overstimulated by that, because it becomes familiar to them. They get used to it. We can't teach them new information, but they are able to look at routines and recognize those routines and know that those feel comfortable because they've happened over and over again. We see that here when they start at Town Square. Many of them are anxious the first week or two. And by the time we get to the 3rd or 4th week, they walk in like it's nothing, because they've begun to feel that routine, that regular feeling. It becomes familiar to them. And that's something that you want to be able to continue to endorse for them as they decline more. The more structure, the more routine it is, the better off it is. Okay. All right. Next educational series, we're going to actually do some role plays with people who are, I'm going to have some of my staff help me out, and we're going to kind of do a, what do you do in this situation? So my question would be to you folks, if you're having challenging situations, or a situation has occurred, if you want to write it down and drop it off at the front desk, or another time that you're here for a support group or whatever, you can send it over or email it to Vanessa or one of the girls up front. The cards are up front with everybody's emails on there. That would be really helpful for me. Okay? All right. Thank you.